Hey, it's Chris. Today I'm gonna help you compare the 4th generation iPad Air and the brand new 11-inch 2021 iPad Pro. Why these two iPads in particular? Well, it's actually a very natural comparison because if you want something that's better than an entry-level iPad, but at the same time you don't wanna max out and get the biggest, best iPad that you possibly could buy, or if you just don't like a bigger iPad screen for whatever reason, then you're staring the iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro squarely in the eyes. The 4th gen iPad Air starts at $599. The 11-inch iPad Pro starts at $799. So what do you get for that $200 difference? Well, at the end of this video, I'm gonna make it as easy as humanly possible for you to make your buying decision with about a 15-second answer. But let me just kick things off by saying this. In all the different ways and categories that we're about to compare these two devices, the iPad Air is always going to be good enough. There isn't a type of work or output that you're gonna be able to generate on the iPad Pro that you can't with the iPad Air. But depending on what you do, maybe good enough isn't actually good enough. So should you spend that extra $200? Well, let's get into it. Let's start out by talking about performance, processors, speed. What we're really talking about here is the iPhone 12's processor versus the 13-inch MacBook Pro's processor. Wait, what? I thought we were talking about iPads here. Has Chris lost it? Nope, because the 4th gen iPad Air runs on the same A14 chip as the iPhone 12, while the new iPad Pro runs on the same M1 chip that powers the latest 13-inch MacBook Pro. And I actually think that's an interesting way to think about this, to frame it. I think it brings a little extra perspective into this comparison. Now, in terms of work, in terms of output and production, there's nothing you can't accomplish with an A14 chip that you magically can with an M1. That said, faster is faster. Popular iPad app Procreate's website says that their app is gonna run 4 times faster on the new M1 chip. So, do you feel the need for speed? Graphic designers working with a lot of layers might. Video editors working with a lot of 4K 60 content might. Photographers working with enormous photo files might. The majority of people, though, will probably only benefit from the M1 processor in terms of future overhead. You know, like if you're planning on holding onto this iPad purchase for dear life and you want it to feel faster farther into the future. And hey, this is a great time to remind you that if you're liking the vibe of this video so far, this is a great time to subscribe. Now, I've already unboxed and reviewed the green 4th gen iPad Air, but in the very near future, I'll be unboxing and reviewing the new iPad Pro. So if that's something you don't want to miss, get yourself subscribed. All right, the display is really the next thing that we need to touch on here because it's easy to look at the specs and think both of these have the same 264 ppi LCD with True Tone, with a wide color gamut, and call it a day. But the truth is, these screens offer very different experiences. Even though the 11-inch iPad Pro does miss out on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro's drool-inducing mini LED tech. Even so, the 11-inch iPad Pro's screen is brighter than the Air's by 100 nits, nothing to sneeze at. But the biggest difference between these two displays really comes from the 120 Hz refresh rate, which means if you plan on making good use of an Apple Pencil, or if you plan on doing some serious iPad gaming, then you really might actually care about ProMotion. And if you do really care about the Apple Pencil experience and you want it to be as natural as possible, you might want to consider picking up a Paperlike screen protector for some added texture. Subscribers know I always install a Paperlike when I get my hands on a brand new iPad. All right, let's talk about cameras. The iPad Pro does have better rear cameras versus the iPad Air, but I'm not even gonna mention the specs. The Pro is gonna be able to take better photos for whatever that's worth. But the camera comparison that really matters here is the front-facing selfie cam, which is so much better on the iPad Pro. See, the iPad Air features a relatively wimpy 7-megapixel front camera, but the Pro's got a 12-megapixel camera with a much, much wider field of view. And not only that, but the Pro has an awesome new feature called Center Stage, which pans and zooms to keep you in the picture when you move around on FaceTime and Zoom calls. So if you wanna look better for your remote meetings or for school or just for those family calls, then that's gonna be a big bonus. All right, well, how about storage and memory? How much do you really need? The iPad Pro can be upgraded up to 2 terabytes of storage along with 16 gigs of RAM, while the iPad Air can get up to 256 gigs with a lot less RAM. But honestly, 2 terabytes and 16 gigs of RAM is far beyond what most people would ever even dream of using. The real story here is how much storage you can get not on the top end, but on the base configuration between the Air and the Pro. With the Pro, you get double the starting storage with 128 gigs versus only 64 gigs on the entry-level Air, which is pretty significant. And this brings us to design and colors. Now, I haven't really addressed it yet in this video, but the size and weight of these two devices are really, really close. They both essentially offer an 11-inch screen experience. There's only 0.1 inches worth of a difference, so it's not even hardly worth talking about. In fact, they're so similar that aside from the camera cutouts, most cases are interchangeable. What is very different here though are the color options. If you want a Pro, but you want something a little more exciting than just silver or gray, you're gonna be stuck with getting a skin or a case that can add a little bit of color. Because the Pro doesn't come in nearly the array of colors that the Air does. That said, how much do the colors really matter in the end if you're gonna end up slapping a case on your iPad, either for the convenience of a keyboard or for protection? Probably not so much. Now, what about authentication when you need to pay for something on your device or just unlock your device? The iPad Air uses Touch ID and it reads your fingerprint with a built-in sensor on the top button, while the iPad Pro uses Face ID for authentication. Personally, my favorite between the two is Face ID, but you know what? There's a lot of people out there who really love Touch ID and they wish it would be in every Apple device. It doesn't really matter, but if you do have a strong preference, then that might be worth considering when you're making this purchase because you're probably gonna end up unlocking this device several times throughout the day if you're a heavy user. The last thing to say about this is that Apple claims that the odds of spoofing Face ID are something like 1 in a million versus just 1 in 50,000 or so for Touch ID. Let's take a minute to just briefly mention the speaker situation because it's actually kind of a big deal in this comparison. The iPad Air sort of pretends to have nicer sound than it really produces. And what I mean by that is that there are 4 speaker grills or speaker cutouts on the iPad Air, but there's really only 2 speaker drivers. The Pro, on the other hand, does have 4 actual drivers and they're configured as a stereo pair, which produces a richer, fuller, more dynamic, and overall more satisfying output. So practically speaking, if you're gonna watch a lot of Netflix or YouTube or listen to some music without external speakers or without headphones or AirPods, you might actually care. Also, if you want to sound better on your Zoom calls or maybe you want to podcast in a pinch and don't have an external microphone to plug in either case, the Pro is where you should be. Let's talk about ports. The iPad Air has a nice USB-C port now, but the iPad Pro just got support for USB 4 and Thunderbolt. Now these ports look the same, so what's the difference? Well, let's put it like this. If you're gonna skimp on internal storage and you're gonna be planning on using external storage, that Thunderbolt port is gonna do way faster transfer speeds if you're moving a lot of files around. That's a big benefit. Also, if you plan on hooking up an external monitor, which there aren't a ton of use cases for right now because most apps end up just mirroring what's on the iPad on an external display, but you never know what's gonna happen at WWDC. One of these days, I do expect Apple to roll out some better or real external display support. But if you do care about external display support now or in the future, then you're probably gonna end up valuing that Thunderbolt more than a USB-C. When it comes to Wi-Fi and cellular, the situation is pretty similar on both of these. You get Wi-Fi 6 and MIMO. In other words, it's really nice and fast, gonna be great around the house. Where things differ is when it comes to 5G and 4G. The Air is stuck on 4G, but 4G has a much more robust network built out here in the US. If you switch to 5G, yes, those speeds can be blazing fast if you find yourself in the right spot. Both of these iPads are gonna work with Apple's Magic Keyboard, which I've said many times is my favorite typing experience on an iPad, hands down. And both iPads are gonna work with the latest, greatest Apple Pencil too. So really, the accessory situation is roughly the same for each of these. And if you're looking for some great iPad accessories, I have covered a ton here on this channel before. So you can just search Daily Tech, Daily TEKK, iPad accessories, and you're welcome. Okay, decision time. Let me try to make this as easy as humanly possible. If you care about your iPad feeling faster for longer into the future, if looking good on Zoom calls and FaceTime is a priority, if you want a brighter display and or a better Apple Pencil or gaming experience, if you want either more overall storage or more base storage, if you need or want 5G, Thunderbolt connectivity, better speakers and mics, or Face ID, then go with the iPad Pro. And if those things don't matter, or you can live without them, or if you want a more colorful iPad, then get the Air. Going with either of these iPads, you're gonna be able to do some incredible work. And when you're done, you'll be able to enjoy some great, relaxing Netflix, gaming, or whatever your leisure activity is on the side. Functionally, you can do all the same work on the Air that you can on the Pro. It's just that the Pro offers a richer, fuller, brighter, more capable, and honestly, probably more enjoyable tablet experience at the end of the day. That, and it is just gonna last you longer before you feel compelled to upgrade. All right, that's it for this video. If you liked it, let me know. If it was helpful, I appreciate the feedback. Either way, if it was helpful or wasn't, just drop me a comment and let me know. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you like this video, because my upcoming iPad Pro unboxing and review and comparisons and tips, all those videos are gonna be rolling out soon. So get yourself subscribed, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.